Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Conblusier, a mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities. Today's webinar features Libero Copper and Gold, which is a mineral exploration company that holds a collection of porphyry copper deposits throughout the Americas in prolific jurisdictions. The portfolio includes Big Bulk, Big Red, Esperanza, and Mocoa. Today, I have with me on the webinar Ian Harris, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer at Libero. The format of today's webinar will be comprised of two parts. In the first part, Ian will provide an update on Libero Copper, including an overview of the company's projects and what investors have to look forward to in the coming year. In the second part, we'll take your questions live. So please send us your questions using the chat feature and we'll get to as many as we can. And I'll note that you can type your questions in at any point throughout the presentation. To start, we'll handle the disclosures and then get into it. So for Libero Copper, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Libero corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Libero Copper specific disclosures. So with that out of the way, I'll turn it over to Ian to update you on Libero Copper and what you have to look forward to with the story.
Thanks a whole bunch for the introduction. It's nice to be here again and look forward to providing this update. It's got a pretty heavy focus on what's going on, especially in Colombia, because there's so much interesting things going on that we're very excited about. But I'll get right into it. It might be a little bit of a repeat, but of course, lots of forward-looking statements in this presentation, and everybody should do their own due diligence. And I've had this slide up here for a while, and I'm sure if people are watching this today, there might be a reason that they're into or can see what's coming in copper. But I'm a mining engineer with 25 years experience in the industry, and it's still hard for me to wrap my head around, right? Because normally when we look at mining, it's a linear growth. Sometimes it's a little bit more growth than other times, but we're really looking at coming up at some really geometric type growth associated with the energy transition demand. And it's really starting to come into play right now because, we went from 2 million electric vehicles to 5 million electric vehicles to 10 million electric vehicles, I think is the last estimate. And that copper demand is really coming to play, and something that's been said oftentimes when we look at this analysis, a lot of times people look at the demand side, but it's not always looked at from the supply side, or a deep understanding, if we push the copper price up, then more projects will come online. But there's so much complexity that we know that it's going to be very difficult to bring this amount of copper online. In fact, this old, now not that dated, slides that came from Goldman Sachs expected us to see a small surplus or pretty close to break even in 2022 and 21. And lo and behold, both years were in a deficit. So we're already starting to see the separation between supply and demand on the copper side. And when the part we don't talk about is what is that? What is 8.3 million tons of copper? Well, these are the 10 largest copper mines in the world. And together, they produce less copper than the expected gap in 2030. That means we have 7 years to replicate the 10 largest mines in the world. And it's not going to happen. It just is an impossible task. We're going to see it's going to be a very interesting scenario that plays out, right? And I guess what a lot of people aren't seeing is the geopolitical impacts. I think we see some of the new laws in the United States focusing on bringing production back home. We see what Canada is doing, et cetera, et cetera. But this is all playing out in front of us. I think it's just only the beginning of the story. Most mining companies have known it's just become longer and longer and longer the time periods required to take projects into production. And I think one of I heard the term canary in the coal mine is moly, right? We've seen moly prices absolutely explode in the last 6 months, right? Gone almost double price in the 6-month period because of a lack of supply. So as the paper transactions combined with actual real inventories, then things are starting to play out. We've also seen a considerable increase again in the price of copper, also playing out. So I think that 2023 is going to be a very, very exciting year in the overall space, and it's going to be something that's talked about a lot. But it's something that we saw. I think we took that into our mindset. I joined the company in January of 2021, and we acquired some additional projects. I was really the most compelling project for personal reasons and personal experience in the past, really compelled to the Mocoa project. But again, understanding the real requirement of copper that the world needs, we were looking for, we know there's going to be a geopolitical play. So being in the Americas was critical. It's also from a management point of view, but we're looking for the projects that have the potential to be large size and scale. We really don't have the capacity to build 200 new mines. So we're going to be, you've got to be in that class A type project. And those were the kind of the characteristics that we were looking for, the potential to be very large, very near surface, porphyry copper, and have those potentials, and looking at checking the boxes of the ability to become future mines. So I'm going to get right into it with and a little bit of backdrop. I apologize to anybody who's seen this presentation before, but I was previously Senior Vice President and Country Manager for Corriente Resources, and was there for 6 years with the Mirador project, also the Bonanza and San Carlos project, but took that project all the way through development to the start of construction. And it went on to become the first large-scale industrial mine in the history of Ecuador. And so the Mirador, because it's the same Jurassic belt, very similar type geology, size and scale potential, but the ability to take all those lessons learned and apply it from the very beginning in a project. And so that's really been a lot of the work that's been done in the background. And it's a project that's worth it, right? It is already, has a very large resource at 636 million tons. It's open in all directions. I'll be following up here a little bit, showing some of the upside potential. It's showing that classic Jurassic potential of having multiple porphyry centers. We've identified some key targets. We've followed up with it with geochemistry and really done our homework to say that this project has a real potential to seriously expand its size and scale. It already contains 2 million tons of copper, and it contains 232,000 tons of moly. And remember the previous moly side. There's actually a picture of the core, and that's molybdenite, the main sulfide copper, moly ore. That's really becoming something very compelling. And I'll just hit the whole moly story right from the beginning. To start, the resource, which we believe can be expanded dramatically, already contains 232,000 tons of moly. As comparison, world production of moly from 2021 was 279,000 tons. So basically, it contains a whole world supply of moly for a year. It's one of the biggest non-developed moly projects in the world, and even some of the grades of Mocoa are similar to some moly-only projects. And why is it so exciting? Because our resource estimate was based on a $10 per pound moly price, where the price yesterday was $38 a pound. To put it in perspective, if we use today's copper price and today's moly price, that would increase our resource grade by about 60% due to the moly credit. So it would be it has a massive impact and puts a massive importance on this project. Then getting back to the standard is, why Colombia, right? What is going on? Why is copper so important to Colombia, and why do we believe in its potential in the country? And I think we have to look, I think a lot of people have been following the political side of Colombia and seeing a new leftist president come in. He has been extremely clear on the energy transition that he wants Colombia to be a leader in, but also has a deep understanding that means not just a transition in the way that energy is created, but in the prime industry of the country. And I think that's a very important takeaway. Oil represents 6% directly of the GDP of the country. It's 40% of the exports. If you add in coal, it's over 60% of the country's exports, and it's the largest source of government revenue. So it's not just how we produce the energy in Colombia, it's how do we replace that industry. So that is why copper is so important, because Colombia sits on the most prolific copper belt in the world. Between Chile to Panama, there are 12 of the 20 largest mines in the world are on that little strip of land that are the Andes Mountains. There's basically 3 significant belts based on different times that this subduction zone has popped out copper mines. And where, geology does not respect countries' boundaries. And so that exact Jurassic Porphyry belt, which is in Ecuador, also goes into Colombia. So if we look at Chile, which is world known for its copper production, but lo and behold, the next up and comer was Peru. And now between the two countries, they produce 45% of the world's copper. To put it into comparison, all of the OPEC countries of the world produce about 39% of the world's oil. So that gives you an idea of the geopolitical importance that copper will play and of this region. Lo and behold, in Ecuador, Mirador, which is now a producing mine out of Ecuador, but with 6 different projects in development. So Ecuador is poised to be the next large producer of copper, but in that very same Jurassic belt, and actually those dots are a little off, but because they're actually closer, because it's only about 150 kilometers between those projects, within the area that's been explored in Ecuador, it already has Pananza, San Carlos, Warintza, and Mirador. And proof that Colombia has that same potential is the Mocoa project. And that is why it has significant importance. And the reason Mocoa is so important, because there's also very few advanced developed projects that actually contain a resource in the country, where Mocoa is one of the most significant. That is also, still has the potential to grow. And I think, and I'm going to find the nice way of saying this, probably the only project with the potential of actually producing copper, not just copper minerals, for various reasons. So when we started the project and it became part of it, it was always a basic, simple strategy. And it was build strength locally, build reputation and alliances nationally, and that will drive political will. It's always, every cycle there's a new president. And so it's about generating that political will and about making sure that you're seen as a leader and a source of credible knowledge in order to guide policy. And that's what we did locally. 85% of our workers are local, including 60% of our professionals. We built a relationship with our local communities that have gotten to the point where we have signed a participation and inclusion agreement with the community closest to the project, with 95% support. The other 5% weren't in town during that period, which makes sure there's a structured way on how we work together with the community and co-create, co-planning. We recently built a road, for example, that helped design it, that it would be beneficial not just for the company but also for them and their kind of artisanal sugarcane projects locally. And we've also got them involved in, they will be the ones taking the water samples and working with the university for doing our water baseline. We've created some extremely strong alliances nationally with the most important universities in the country. And I'll probably get a little bit more into that. And that has really, I think, helped drive the understanding and the political will. Without beating a dead horse, also very strong. I do speak fluent Spanish. I do live in Colombia with my family. To be able to be also recognized leader in the national press. Here is probably the biggest newspaper in the country. And so as a strategy, we've actually been developing and working together with the government of creating an alliance on the backbone of the Mocoa asset, right? Where our basic strategy is building out a production chain today, looking at building out that chain, but having it underpinned by the future development of the Mocoa project. And this has been very exciting because the overall goal is not just a pathway of advancing the project, but a pathway and working together with the government on a pathway of taking the project all the way through to the start of production. So we think this could be a massive catalyst for the company because it will show a clear pathway to work developed together with the government on how to take this project forward into not just development or exploration, but to production. And so that also combines, and these are some examples. This is the work we've done with Montclair, signing that agreement with them. It took, we built a relationship, had almost monthly meetings together with them on working together. What's their dreams? What's their plans? How can we work together? Building that relationship that achieved that agreement together. This is actually a picture of the Vice Minister talking about the National Strategic Plan and the importance of copper. That's actually copper that was produced from the core of the Mocoa project, the minerals of the Mocoa project, to actually produce copper metal from that, and to show and demonstrate that it is a real possibility. And it's worth it. Like, it's already one of the most significant projects we did today on the planet, but it also has that huge demonstration that it's only the beginning. On this map, you can see all the exploration drilling that has been done on the project that developed that resource through geophysics and geochemistry, which we recently followed up on and put out a press release on that interpretation, looking at the different leach caps. But we've identified an additional 5 or 6 different potential porphyry centers around the project to say that these, that the project overall has a very long way to grow, not just from a geophysics, but also from a geochemistry point of view. Working with Matt Wonder, who is our VP of exploration, helped take the Antamina project from exploration all the way through the start of production of a huge knowledge in these intrusive style deposits to help identify these future growth. And again, the existing deposit area is also open in all directions. It's open at depth. It's open to the east, west, north, and south. So I won't get too much more into it, but and this is something that's actually a conversation that comes up a lot, right? We did put a hole into the project last year to help confirm some of the historical drilling on the project and also fill in where we thought that it was modeled as 2 separate high-grade cores, and we thought that there was a potential that they actually combined. So we did put a hole out into the project last year, and lo and behold, it came back at over 1,200 meters to the end of the hole, was mineralized, including 250 meters at a 0.75. And to put that into perspective, what does that mean? If we looked at the same time period in the last 12 months of some of the best drill holes in the world, all the better holes in the world came from 3 projects. Came from Filo de Sol, Solaris' Warintza, and also MCSA. And these are projects that had, hundreds of thousands of meters put into them those years. And our first hole on the Mocoa project puts it in that category. So that was also a very important confirmation for us to understand, looking at this historical information, is it credible? Making sure that we understood it. How can we correlate it to our future exploration programs? But we do know that this project has the capacity to be, one of the best projects in the world. But the real issue of the project has been seen as the jurisdictional risk, right? It's not how many pounds in it, as if they can become a mine. And that is why there's been so much focus by the company on making sure that we're creating a true pathway, so that when we are advancing the project, that value is realized for our shareholders. It's taken some time. Petro has been president since August of last year, but I'm extremely proud of the work and the amount of advance that we've had in a very short period of time, including the December and January period. So it really speaks a lot on the team that we have here in Colombia. And I guess I shouldn't not mention that we've also picked up all the open ground, about 100,000 hectares. We put in the title request that blocks out the area for us for any of the open area that's on that Jurassic belt within the area. So I think that we have a strong short term, we have a strong medium term, and we have a strong long term in Colombia on the back of the work that's been done, creating a very solid base for advancing this project. Oh, I'm missing completely a slide. Now I'm worried. There was, and I'm hoping that everybody gets a copy of it, but there was a really significant slide that we just put in because this work that's been done by the company and where Colombia is going. We've seen over the last 2 months, a very strong push, even by the president himself, to advance copper and the strategic metals within the country. So I'm kind of disappointed that this slide didn't make it into the last deck. It's actually supposed to be right there. Apologize for that, but hopefully that gets in there. But we have, the president himself, the minister of energy and mines, the vice minister of mines, the minister of industry, the advisor to the president, who are actually in the area of Putumayo. We're the only project there talking about the importance of this project. Although I guess anyone is more than happy to look at our social media, because we've been pretty good at making sure that is seen. Oh, and I shouldn't forget the Minister of Finance. And it's hard to talk so much about Mocoa and the importance, and then also realize that we have multiple projects within the portfolio that all would be individually company building style projects. So I think it's also very important to mention the work that's going on in Argentina. This is a project that was last drilled in 2018. And the last hole into it was 387 at about a 0.75 equivalent copper, including the first 232 meters at about a 1% equivalent copper. Unfortunately, it was Argentina in 2018 and in copper, so not a lot of traction in market, but this is obviously one of the most interesting geological to be followed up on projects that I can see. So again, very similar strategy. The most important is building that strong base, creating those relationships, and those are the things that we've done. We had a tiny setback when we finally got to sit down with the Minister of Mines June of last year, where previously we were looking at unsuspending a exploration license, where then the minister said, it's probably better to come out clean. There was a little bit of a mess left on behind. There's no clear legality on suspending or unsuspending a license. So we resubmitted our EIAs, and we've created a wonderful relationship. The team that we have on the ground basically has a type of relationship where they're talking almost on a daily basis and understanding all the different steps, working together to advance this project. And we do believe that any minute we'll be getting the green light to start mobilizing on the project. So again, this first quarter for both projects can be extremely exciting. And again, it's not, I think that one drill hole really sums up extremely well the quality of the project, but also from a geological perspective, It has so many similarities between our project and the geology of Filo del Sol in the same Miocene belt, but have a year-round drilling season, and so many similarities in the type of geology where you have indications of significant multiple pulses of mineralization, which is, has a high potential, or we believe has a high potential of having a higher grade feeder zone. So it's basically the plan that Filo followed is very similar, where you're testing the top of the system, and that's our goals on this project, to identify the vectors to start hunting for that potential feeder zone. Again, the grades at surface, that start from surface, would be a wonderful project, but it also has that very interesting potential upside with a high grade feeder zone. And then the last is Big Red. It's a project that probably this year will have a little bit less priority, especially with so much going on, where we do believe that we'll be drilling potentially in Argentina and in Colombia in the near future. But it still has some of those very similar aspects of those compelling questions, where we're seeing large intersections of mineralization over large extended periods, large intervals. Here's a great example where we have about 500 meters of mineralization complete through the hole, but we're looking at a dike swarm and still trying to understand where that mineralization is coming from. Is still eluding us, but it's and I guess I have one more map that shows where all the drilling has been focusing on this Terry target, which is identified as a true porphyry discovery, but it is overall a very large land package. So there's still a lot of work to be done at Big Red. And last but not least, some of the things I'm very proud of is being part of a company that has such a high quality board associated to it. I kind of went over my experience in Ecuador and been involved in multiple projects around the world, but I've also have a group of people that have been associated with the development of some of the most significant deposits. Ernie Mast, so the two closest operating copper mines to the to the Mocoa project are Mirador, and the other is Cobre Panama. And Ernie Mast was previously the CEO of Cobre Panama when it was INMET, and also got that project all the way through to the start of construction. Rob Pease took the Mount Milligan mine from discovery all the way through through construction, where it was sold to Thompson Creek, which is one of the the few newest mines in British Columbia. Ian Slater, as the chairman, has seen multiple successes through founding multiple companies around the world and in Colombia. Brad Rourke is the CEO of Scotty Resources, is also an expert within the Golden Triangle, et cetera, et cetera. So and also Michael Sununu brings a massive amount of experience in strategic advisory on these types and styles of energy projects. And so again, it's just an amazing board to be a part of, followed up with an amazing team on the ground. I mentioned Matt Wander and his experience too in developing the Antamina project in Peru, also one of the largest projects in the world, and a team on the ground that has the ability to really execute and get the job done. I do say one of my strengths is speaking Spanish, because I do not always have to pick people that just because they speak English, but I can get the best people. Because that barrier is eliminated. So again, it's been kind of a rough 12 months for lots of companies. I do think we're seeing a significant change here with Libero. We're starting to see us pulling that corner and people starting to see the potential. Significant catalysts at Mocoa that we believe are coming up, also in Esperanza, and also the whole story behind Moly and the Mocoa project itself. We're starting to see some significant catalysts. And we have a key strategic partner in Anglo-Asian, which is a producer. They're London listed with operations in Azerbaijan, and they're also a massive source of technical advisory that when we need those metallurgists and mining engineers to start looking on how you would actually be advancing these type of projects, they really come to the table, and they participated every single time in every single one of our financings since they came in to maintain their 20%. So again, in a high level summary, I think we're in the right commodities with copper and moly. We're in the right jurisdictions where we are. We have the right type of geology with 3 separate projects. We have the experience on not just exploring, but actually getting projects across the finish line, which the end goal is to turn them into mines. And that's the type of projects that we want to work for. We have a strong partner, and I think we have the right strategy to be applied. So I appreciate that, and I think it's now open for questions.
Great, thanks a lot, Ian. So we'll now turn to the Q&A portion of the webinar, and just a reminder to everybody on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So to kick things off, you mentioned right now kind of the goal this year is to potentially drill both in Colombia and Argentina. Do you have any idea kind of what kind of meterage you'd be looking at, what scale of program that you might like to run?
Yeah, I'll start with Argentina because we have budgeted a 5,000 meter program this year at that project, and that's built around answering some of those compelling questions and giving us the information and feedback now to continue to build future drilling plans. Mocoa is a little bit of a different story because it is the type of project that we believe when we start drilling on it, you just don't stop. So our current budgeting is based on starting with 1 drill, and I think within 4 or 5 months bringing in a second drill. It's one of the reasons that we put in the time to build it really more like an upgrade of the pathway all the way to the site. So it's about 1,000 meter vertical climb. Helicopters are very expensive and more expensive in South America. So it was very important. We use man-portable drills that are, beasts of burden, and men can move them from pad to pad or up and down the hills. But you really need a solid path to be able to get the mules to get everything up and down, to be able to move with minimal impact, too, which we love, with minimal disturbance, move from pad to pad without the need of a helicopter. And I guess I'm going to talk because I'm sure somebody's going to ask, right? When will that happen? And I understand, and trust me, I get it. Like that, that's the most understandable catalyst that a company can drill results, get excitement, right? But I also think it's one of the biggest mistakes that most companies make. It's all this drive to drill, right? And that is what drives the company, right? Unfortunately, I'm a mining engineer, right? And I want to build mines. I want to develop and build mines. And it doesn't help me tomorrow to drill, right? It helps me to de-risk the project. And that is why we've spent so much energy, so much intention working with our communities and working on developing that political will and developing a partnership on a project, right? Because it becomes important to the country. It's what I liked about Ecuador. At the end of the day, the Mirador project had an impact on the country. It was important for the country. And the hardest part is making sure, getting people up on the learning curve, that they get it, that they understand. And Mocoa has the same potential. It has the potential to be a new prime industry for the country. And that's what's really going to create shareholder value, so that every time we do get new drill hole results out, that they're going to really see that value creation. And I'm very happy that we feel like we're at the end of really making that catalyst being known.
Okay, perfect. Good answer. So we have kind of, I guess, two to kind of build on that a little bit. Kind of getting to the end goal, obviously, as you alluded to, you're a mining engineer. You want to get something into operation down the road one day. I guess at a high level, what steps are there expected, and how long would that take from a timeline point of view? Whether that's environmental permitting, mine permitting, what kind of steps are to come in the future, assuming the government remains supportive and the project is able to move forward and has the license to do so?
I'll start with Argentina, and it is a permit. Right. In that case, it's getting the permits required to advance the project, and we've had the luxury of developing a relationship where we could watch it every single step of the way, making sure it moves from desk to desk, and we're at the end of that process today to mobilize to Argentina. I hate guessing too much in South America because it's full of surprises, right? Bureaucracy anywhere in the world can be unpredictable. But our current guidance is that we do believe that we'll be mobilizing in March actually, that might not be fair. We would like to mobilize in March. What might hold us back is that's also the rainy season, and our access to the project might need some maintenance. And it's been quite a rainy season. It normally ends, and that happens in March, but it's been extended this year. In Colombia, it's a little different because it's less tangible. It's because we want to see, and we're working to create a plan together with the Colombian government. And remember, it's not just presenting that to investors; it's presenting it to the country. Because the goal here is that it's a part of the national strategic planning of the country. But we also believe Colombia right now is in the midst of that. It's presenting to Congress the draft of its national development plan, which then contains multiple components underneath that for discussion. So we also believe that February should be the month where we'll see those significant results. And will be a significant catalyst for advancing this is the solid foundation for moving the project forward. So again, we're not talking quarters. We're talking a month, 2 months.
Right. Okay. So we have a question here. I'll just read it out. It's pretty well worded here. In terms of time taken to go from discovery to making a decision to build a mine, what are the main differences between the three countries in which you operate?
Wow, that's a great question. So the most advanced project is the Mocoa project, right? And I guess I want to be frank that it also depends on your development strategy, right? And I've actually seen these conversations, been involved in multiple conversations for multiple projects, not just this one, right? Because the old school method is go as big as possible, and then you create these gigantic, Pascalama size type projects. With billions and billions of dollars of investment required. And then the permitting process is, huge. And so if you look at Mocoa, and if that was the strategy, and that would be normally the strategy for an explorer, right? They don't want to develop it. They want to be bought out. And the way of ensuring getting bought at the best price is showing the biggest project possible. But I do think there's another route, which would be starting a smaller project and then expanding. And I think there's some successful examples of that. I think Gran Colombia in Colombia itself is a wonderful example of that now is RS Gold, that started small and continued to expand and expand and expand. Right now they're, I think, probably revenuing close to $1 billion. Don't quote me on that one, but you can become substantial. So, Mocoa really is in the stage now where we're starting baseline work. We're going to be starting that engineering work. And I think I see something, what would be the drilling plans for Mocoa? So obviously there's tons of space for future expansion. And we really need to follow up on that. But I think we are going to also be following on more also upgrading, looking at some of the engineering, the metallurgy, geotechnical information, looking at baseline work to create significant optionality. Because again, we're working with the Colombian government on creating that pathway. So we want to, I think that is what's most important, having a clear pathway on how to get into the project into production. Argentina does not have a resource. It has some significant discoveries. It's got the grade. It's checking a whole lot, I think, more boxes than Big Red. But again, it would be, it would go from actually developing a resource target, doing a resource definition, upgrading the resource PEA, et cetera, those stages. So it's a good 10 years type project, but we like to be forward thinking that we don't want to be spending a massive amount of money on projects that have no chance of becoming a future mine. But what we do like about San Juan is that it's the premier mining jurisdiction in South America. If it was a country, it'd be ranked number one in terms of its endowment and as a jurisdiction. And I guess the same should be said about BC. I think Big Red is probably the furthest behind, but it is probably also the most recognized jurisdiction. And if I had a silver, a crystal ball, it would also be a M&A target earlier, right? Where I think in South America, projects need to be highly de-risked before majors come in, where in BC, there's a little bit more confidence.
Perfect. Okay. So another question here. I guess just wondering, maybe from your perspective, what are the key, might be one thing, it might be a couple things, but what are the key things that you're focusing on to improve shareholder value going forward?
Yeah, I think we gave a pretty good summary. There's a reason I live in Colombia, because that is where I think I can create the most value in the nearest term. It's also a shorter distance to get to Argentina.
Perfect.
I think the number way that I can create shareholder value as a CEO is doing some of the similar things that were done in Ecuador, creating those and working personally on those relationships, right? I do the interviews in Colombia. I sat down yesterday was with the Vice Minister of Mines. I actually have a meeting with the Minister of Finance, just got a call this morning to meet with the Minister of Finance next week. Right, I do those, and it's because I do believe that de-risking the project in terms of having a clear pathway is the number one best way of creating significant shareholder value. There was a time after putting out a single hole at Mocoa that our share price shot up significantly. Unfortunately, then people started reading the newspaper and seeing that there's a high chance of a leftist president getting elected, and that scared people away. Yeah, but I do believe, I wish people would pay a little bit more closer. I wish that slide was in the deck. I don't know what happened. That shows that from the beginning, there's been a heavy focus in Colombia on strategic metals because it's the industry that's required to, there's no other options, right? Whether Petro doesn't want oil and coal or the world doesn't want to buy it anymore. Right, it's got a time period of life moving forward, and it's a massive part of the country's economy. And so the only thing of size would be copper projects are very large, and to be frank, the country wants to produce copper in the country. Right, which is also a big good sign, right? Especially when 60% of the world's copper is controlled by China. So having that vision as a country too, I think is wonderful because it opens up a new marketplace, and it's the correct strategy. And then the next, I think, is, I do not take my eye off of Argentina and because I also think it's a different type of project. It's that it's not a day by day adding another pound of value and continue to chug along. It could be one of those explosive type projects when it begins to move forward. And I think those are the two key areas. And I think there's a lot of good geologists, there's a lot of good mining engineers, but I think that my strength is in creating those relationships, understanding and developing those strategies, understanding the language, getting knee deep into it, to make sure creating a pathway of moving these projects forward. And I think, and that will shine. And also having a lot of people that work with me who's gone through similar experiences of seeing projects go all the way to the finish line. Many of the times they're handed off, but they become future mines, right? We're Cobre Panama, Mirador, Antamina, have all become, and Mount Milligan, they've all become mines. And I guess, sorry, I'm getting off and getting a little long-winded, but when I have a metallurgical question, I can talk to Ernie Mast. When there's geological questions, I got Matt Wonder, and on the team, right? I mean, it's like or other questions, then you have an operator like Anglo Asian to go talk to. So it's nice having those sounding boards too.
Perfect. Yeah, no, it was a great answer. And I definitely agree with you in terms of Colombia. It's a big blind spot by the market right now that people have just kind of tuned out from it and haven't taken the time to understand what's going on and really, look at the companies and the good work there and the support from the government, as you say, for that green transition and energy metals going forward. So I think probably the last question we have here that's come in, I think last night press release went out. You're doing a financing right now. What are the use of proceeds on that, and what's, I guess, the rationale behind that?
And I guess it was a little weird too, the little break there, but it was obviously there were some very key shareholders, et cetera, that have been very supportive of the company. But doing a financing in December and in January, was not ideal timing. But I almost like to think it's almost an additional tranche in the original financing. We had that key commitment when everybody got back from vacation that we would do this additional financing. But really, this is a very healthy cushion to make sure that either to put the work into Mocoa, the drill is still on site to start drilling right before having to do other significant financing. And the same would be true in Argentina. So I kind of look at it as this is the amount of money required to make sure that we're hitting some significant catalysts before doing any other financing. We obviously had some option payments, et cetera, at the end of the year, but that's all covered. And now it's kind of a clean slate. Our burn is pretty low. And to make sure we just keep hammering away and make sure we hit those catalysts and start those catalysts. Perfect.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Appreciate that. I think, we've had a couple more come in here. We have one here just wondering about moly, but I think you covered that very well in the presentation. So I'd refer that viewer to look at the replay and get your comments on that aspect of the story at Mocoa. Okay.
Froze there for a little second.
Yeah, I think we've covered them all pretty well here. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay.
I'm looking out the side of my eye so I can, glance at stuff. And it was an interesting question. I might be getting it totally wrong in the question, but the need for more analysts to cover the mining sector. And I might go off on a tangent, right? But there's been, there was a methodology when junior mining companies even became a thing. They're really junior explorers, right? Where majors didn't do a good job at it, so they wanted to give it to somebody who's, like to a startup company, right? Looking at advancing projects, let them deploy virtual capital, et cetera. They're probably more efficient, less costly. They were right, and generate. But I think there's been a high level of focus on drilling results, et cetera. And I think the world is changing. I think we're going to go through a very interesting time period because the world now depends on these metals. to move us forward. I think we're going to see a lot more overlap between exploration analysis and also strategic green energy analysis. And then that's why I'm a true believer in that. And that is why this handful of assets are so important, because they have the potential to become future mines, or we're focused on making sure we're checking the boxes to make sure they can be future mines. I believe the highest opportunity is Mocoa, because it's been significantly de-risked from a geological standpoint. It already has a resource. But also from a geopolitical standpoint, being in the Americas is critical. And having that overall look at projects, I think there's going to be a lot more vertical integration within assets. I think things are changing, and it will probably mix up the type of funds that will be going into these types of projects, and also the type of analysis that's used.
Great. Okay. So I think those are all the questions. We're coming up on the hour as well, so we probably should wrap up here. So with that, I would like to thank Ian from Libero Copper for taking the time to host the webinar today with Red Cloud Securities. And thank you to everybody on the line for tuning in with us.
Thanks a ton.